The prison yard was loud and restless under the bright afternoon sun. Inmates paced in circles, lifted weights, and watched each other with cold, hungry eyes. But far from the chaos, one man stood alone near the concrete wall. Steven Seagal. Quiet, calm, steady like a mountain that never moves. Most inmates paid him no attention. He did not talk. He did not brag. He did not join any group. To them he looked like just another new inmate trying to survive the first week. But he was not new. And he was not weak. A gang known as the Iron Fangs noticed him standing alone. They were feared inside Redstone Penitentiary. Strong, brutal, and always hungry for control. Their leader Rocco liked to test new inmates. He believed fear kept the yard in line. And today his eyes locked on Steven. Rocco cracked his knuckles and told his men, "Watch this." The old man looked soft. "We will make an example out of him." The gang moved like wolves spotting a lone target. They surrounded Steven from all sides. One stood behind him. Two blocked the front. Others closed the edges as if sealing a cage. Steven did not step back. He did not flinch. His breathing stayed slow and controlled. His eyes remained half closed. Like someone at complete peace. Rocco smirked and said, "You picked the wrong prison, old man. This yard belongs to us. You pay or you get hurt. Simple rules." Steven lifted his head slowly. His voice was calm. Almost quiet. "I do not want trouble. But if trouble comes, I end it." The gang burst into laughter. To them he looked like a harmless older man with no allies. No reputation. No fight left in him. But they made a fatal mistake. They judged him by silence. Within the next few moments they learned the truth. The man they cornered had once served in missions that broke stronger men. He had survived battles that never made it to the news. He was a former Marine raider. A warrior trained to operate behind enemy lines. A man whose calm was more dangerous than any threat. And what happened next shook the entire prison to its core. It was daytime inside Redstone Penitentiary. A massive concrete fortress known for violence and tension. The kind of place where silence felt dangerous. And noise felt normal. The yard was active as always. Inmates lifted heavy weights with loud grunts. Others paced in circles whispering to their crews. Some played simple card games on old wooden tables. Every corner carried a different kind of energy. Some tense. Some reckless. Some ready to explode. The guards stood on the watchtowers. Lazy, bored, waiting for their shift to end. To them the yard was predictable. Same troublemakers. Same routines. Same heat beating down on the metal rails. None of them realized a storm was about to break right under their noses. In the middle of all this movement, Steven Seagal walked quietly along the far corner of the yard. No one walked with him. No one guarded him. No one spoke to him. He carried himself with calm, steady steps. Each step measured. Each breath controlled. Like a man who had nothing to prove. And nothing to fear. Most inmates looked at him and shrugged. To them he was just another older man thrown into the system. Someone trying to get through the day without stepping on the wrong toes. Someone easy to underestimate. What they did not know was that Steven had lived through things far beyond prison walls. He had survived missions that never appeared in newspapers. He had traveled through war zones where only the toughest fighters returned. He had faced enemies that moved like shadows. And he had stood on the edge of death more times than he could count. He was a former Marine raider. Trained to operate behind enemy lines. Trained to fight in silence. Trained to stay calm under conditions that would break most men. His past was a secret locked behind his quiet expression. A past no inmate could ever begin to imagine. As Steven walked, he noticed everything. The guards on the towers. The gangs grouping near the benches. The men lifting weights while keeping their eyes alert. He read the yard like a soldier reading a battlefield. He knew which groups were dangerous. Which gangs ruled certain zones. Which inmates were unpredictable. But he kept his distance. He did not want attention. Not today. Not ever. Yet attention noticed him anyway. The Iron Fangs, one of the most vicious prison gangs, watched him from the center of the yard. They controlled half the prison. They controlled the weights, the tables, the phones, the underground trade, and most of the fear. Their leader Rocco was a tall, aggressive man, known for starting fights just to establish dominance. He believed in force. He believed in fear. And he believed that every new inmate needed to be tested. Rocco noticed Steven. He watched how Steven walked, alone, quiet, never reacting, never looking intimidated. Rocco mistook that for weakness, a mistake he had made with many men, but never with someone like Steven. He leaned toward his men, his voice low and sharp. "He looks weak. He will be our example today." The yard watches us. If he does not bend, we make him bend. The Iron Fangs nodded without hesitation. They loved violence. They loved control. And they loved watching fear spread across the yard. They had no idea they were walking toward a storm. A storm wrapped in silence. A storm trained by the toughest military units on Earth. Steven remained unaware of their approach. Or at least he acted like he was unaware. He stood near the wall, hands behind his back, eyes scanning the yard slowly, breathing like a man in meditation. Focused, still, balanced. He sensed danger. He always sensed it. He had been trained to read footsteps, shadows, breathing patterns, rising tension in the air. He could feel the Iron Fangs preparing to move. He could feel their energy shift. Hostile, heavy, predictable. But Steven did not turn. He did not break his calm. He simply waited, because he had learned long ago that those who come looking for violence often walk straight into their own lesson. Across the yard, a few older inmates noticed the tension. They whispered to each other. They had seen men like Steven before. Not in prison, but in military bases, in stories, in legends passed around by veterans. Something about his posture, something about his calm, something about his controlled breathing told them he was not a normal inmate. But the Iron Fangs did not care. They saw only a target, a quiet man standing alone, an easy victim for their routine of intimidation. Different men saw different things, but only one man knew exactly what was coming. Steven, before we continue, tell me where you are watching from. And salute to everyone who stays humble even when surrounded by hate. Rocco and his men moved across the yard like a pack closing in on prey. Their heavy boots hit the concrete with slow, confident steps. Each one of them carried the same look, a mix of arrogance, hunger, and cruelty. They loved moments like this. Moments where they could dominate someone who looked quiet. Someone who looked alone. Steven stood exactly where he was. He did not shift his weight. He did not raise his hands. He simply watched them with calm, steady eyes. Eyes that had seen real danger. Not the childish violence of prison gangs, but the true chaos of war. The kind that carved discipline into a man's bones. The Iron Fangs formed a half circle around him. 2 men stood in front. 2 moved to the sides. Rocco stepped right into Steven's path, blocking the only exit from the yard corner. He smirked and pushed Steven with his forearm. A firm shove meant to provoke fear, or at least a reaction. But Steven did not move. His feet stayed planted, as if the ground itself held him in place. Rocco scoffed. You know the rules? You walk in our yard, you pay yard tax. That means respect. Or pain. Your choice, old man. Steven looked at him, calm and unshaken. He said, respect is earned, not forced. The words hit the gang harder than a punch. For a moment their expressions twisted. Confusion, anger, disbelief. No one ever talked back to them. No one ever challenged their authority. Especially not someone who walked alone. Rocco leaned closer. His eyes narrowed. He whispered in a low, threatening tone. You think you are tough? Let us see what kind of man you really are. The gang burst into laughter. It was loud and mocking, designed to attract the attention of the entire yard. And it worked. Inmates all around the yard stopped what they were doing. The weights clanked to the ground. Card games froze mid-play. Men sitting at the tables turned their heads. Everyone knew the Iron Fangs were about to make a scene. One of Rocco's men reached forward and grabbed Steven's sleeve, trying to yank him forward, trying to show dominance, trying to start a fight. What he did not know was that Steven had survived battles where survival depended on speed and precision. Battles where hesitation meant death. Battles where chaos and fear were constant. Steven did not pull back. He did not flinch. He simply turned his wrist slightly, enough to release the grip without using force. The inmate stumbled from his own imbalance. Another member of the gang, taller and more aggressive, stepped in without waiting. He swung a wild punch straight at Steven's head. A punch filled with anger and ego, not technique. For a split second, the entire yard froze. Every inmate turned toward the scene. Some stood up on the benches. Others held their breath. Even the guards on the towers leaned forward, eyes wide, hands gripping the rails, unsure if they should intervene or simply watch. To them it looked like Steven was about to get hit. He looked too calm, too still, too relaxed to defend himself. But Steven had faced far worse than a prison punch. He had survived ambushes and raids. He had fought men trained to kill silently. He had survived situations that demanded perfect timing. His mind did not panic. His body did not tense. He moved the way only a trained warrior moves. Smooth, natural, controlled. As the fist came toward him, Steven shifted his stance by an inch. Just 1 inch. That was all he needed. The punch missed his face by the width of a shadow. The aggressive inmate stumbled forward, expecting to hit something solid. But Steven was no longer where he had been. In that moment the yard understood one thing. Steven Seagal was not normal. Not weak. Not slow. Not scared. But the Iron Fangs did not understand. Not yet. Their pride blinded them. Their confidence kept them foolish. Another man lunged, trying to grab Steven from behind, trying to take advantage of what he thought was an opening. Steven stepped aside with a smooth pivot. The inmate's hands closed around empty air. He lost balance, his own momentum pulling him forward. Gasps spread across the yard. People whispered. People stared. People recorded. The guards froze. One whispered to another. "What is that guy? How is he moving like that?" No one inside Redstone Penitentiary had any idea who Steven really was. They did not know his training, his past, his discipline, his survival instincts, but they were about to find out. Because the real fight had not even started yet. And what happened next would echo across the prison for years. A story whispered from cell to cell. A story that made every gang rethink their choices. They were about to witness something they had never seen before. A former Marine raider facing an entire gang. Calm, silent, and ready. Steven moved with calm precision. Not rushed, not panicked, not emotional. Every motion he made looked controlled, measured, almost effortless. As the punch flew toward him, Steven redirected it with a light shift of his arm. His hand caught the attacker's wrist. A single twist, a silent snap of leverage, and the inmate hit the ground hard. Gasps rippled through the yard. No one even understood what they had seen. It was too fast, too smooth, too disciplined. The kind of move you only saw in military training. Not in a prison yard. Before the first attacker could even groan, 2 more gang members rushed Steven. One charged from the left, the other from the right. They thought speed and numbers would overwhelm him. But Steven reacted with the same calm he had carried since he entered the yard. He stepped aside, redirected the first man with a palm strike to the shoulder. The inmate flipped over himself, landing on his back. Air burst out of his lungs in a heavy exhale. The second man tried to grab Steven from behind. Steven lowered his stance, hooked the man's arm, and pulled him forward. The attacker was lifted off the ground and crashed into the concrete face first. Both men were down in seconds. Steven had not even broken a sweat. The entire yard went silent. Hundreds of inmates froze where they stood, eyes wide, mouths open. Every one of them trying to understand what they had just witnessed. No one had ever seen moves like that. Not from an inmate. Not from a guard. Not from anyone who had ever walked through Redstone Penitentiary. Veterans in the yard stared with raised brows. A few older inmates whispered to each other. "That is military. That is special forces. That is not normal." Guards on the towers jolted out of their boredom. Sirens blared for a moment, then shut off again as officers tried to understand the situation. Guards shouted orders. "Back away. Hands visible. Step away from the fight." But no one moved. Fear kept everyone rooted in place. Because what Steven did next was not violent. Not chaotic. Not uncontrolled. He simply stood still, breathing normally, like a man who had just finished tying his shoes. Not like someone who had dropped 3 men in moments. Rocco stared at the scene in disbelief. His confidence drained from his face. For the first time in years he looked uncertain, confused, maybe even afraid. He watched his strongest men lift themselves off the ground with shaky arms. Their pride broken. Their mouths trembling. Their egos shattered in front of the entire yard. Rocco took 1 step backward. A reflex he did not even notice. His body reacted before his mind understood the danger. He had never stepped back from anyone. Not once. Not in the yard. Not in his entire sentence. But Steven was different. Something about the way he stood. The way he breathed. The way he had put 3 men down without anger. Without noise. Without hesitation. It felt wrong. It felt unreal. It felt like standing in front of something far greater than a normal inmate. Something colder. Sharper. More dangerous. The other inmates slowly backed away. Not because Steven looked threatening, but because he looked too calm. Too composed. It was the calm of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. A man who had fought before. Fought real enemies. Not prison bullies. And survived. The guards pointed their rifles down. Not firing. Not stepping in. Just watching. Unsure if intervening would make things worse. Some guards whispered to each other. "What is he? Where did he learn that? Look at the way he stands. That is not prison training. That is something else. Steven looked at the fallen men. He did not mock them. He did not threaten them. He did not step toward Rocco. He simply said, "Walk away. Violence should be your last choice, not your first." The words echoed through the yard. Clear, firm, balanced. The inmates felt something they could not explain. Respect, mixed with fear, mixed with curiosity. They had never seen someone move with that level of control. And they had never heard someone speak with such quiet authority. Rocco tried to regain his confidence. He clenched his fists. He forced himself to step forward again. But his legs trembled. His breath shook. He felt like he was standing in front of a storm he had triggered himself. He opened his mouth to shout at Steven. But no words came out. Not a single one. In that moment, Rocco knew the truth. He had started something he could not finish. He had provoked a man he did not understand. A man far more skilled than anyone he had ever faced. The yard had seen many fights, but never one like this. Never with silence, precision, respect, and deadly discipline. And for the first time, Rocco felt the fear of a leader who had just made the worst mistake of his life. Because everything that happened next would change his power forever. The blast of the alarm echoed across Redstone Penitentiary. Doors slammed, locks clanked, boots thundered against metal stairs. Within seconds the warden rushed into the yard with a team of senior officers surrounding him, their uniforms sharp, their posture tense, each one gripping a baton or rifle as they scanned the scene. The warden stopped the moment he saw the sight in front of him. Steven stood calm in the center. 3 iron fangs scattered around the ground. Groaning, dizzy, unable to rise. Inmates lined the yard, watching in total silence. The warden's face tightened, not with anger, but with recognition. He knew exactly who this man was. He had read the classified file. He had signed the restricted clearance. He had been warned by higher authorities that this inmate required special observation. One guard stepped closer and whispered, "Sir, this is him. The file you told us about. The one with top-level clearance scans." The warden nodded slowly, his voice low and serious. "Yes, this is Steven Seagal, former Marine Raider." Those words hit the officers like a shockwave. The guards straightened. Eyes widened. Breath stopped. Marine Raider was not a normal title. It was a name spoken with respect even among elite soldiers. Inmates heard it too. The word Raider spread through the yard like wildfire. Men who had served time with veterans. Men who had heard stories from old soldiers. Men who knew the difference between a regular Marine and a Marine Raider. All of them reacted the same way. A mix of awe and fear. Rocco stood frozen. The blood drained from his face. His hands trembled. His mouth hung open. He looked like a man who had just realized he had punched a lion thinking it was a stray cat. Whispers exploded across the yard. Soft at first, then louder, then uncontrollable. A Marine Raider. No way. He took out 3 men without effort. Now it makes sense. His stance, his speed, his calm. We messed with the wrong guy. Some inmates stepped back until their backs hit the yard fence. Others held their arms crossed trying to look tough. But their eyes betrayed them. They were terrified, because they finally understood who Steven really was. A man trained for missions only the toughest warriors handle. A man trusted with operations that never reached the news. A man who fought behind enemy lines in silence. Where failure meant death. Where fear had no place. Where focus and discipline were the only tools for survival. Steven looked at the warden. He did not bow. He did not speak. He simply watched, calm as ever, as if the chaos around him meant nothing. The warden exhaled slowly. He stepped closer, studying the fallen gang members. They were some of the most violent inmates in the prison. Men who had survived dozens of fights. Men who controlled half the yard. Men who ruled through intimidation. Yet now, they lay scattered like leaves after a storm. And Steven stood untouched. The officers moved in. They checked the unconscious inmates. They evaluated the injuries. And they exchanged glances. Not one injury looked chaotic. Not one strike looked wild. Every wound, every bruise, every position of the body showed precision, control, professional skill. Steven had not fought out of anger. He had handled them with exact technique. The kind only elite combat units are trained to use. Rocco swallowed hard. He wanted to run. But his legs did not move. He wanted to speak. But words refused to form. His entire sense of power shattered in minutes. The warden finally addressed the yard. His voice cut through the silence. "Listen up. No one touches this man. No one tests him. No one provokes him. He is under special classification. And his record goes beyond what anyone here can understand. The yard listened. No one argued. No one shouted back. Every single inmate remained silent. Even the loudest gang leaders kept their eyes down. Steven did not look proud. He did not smile. He simply nodded. As if none of this mattered to him. As if this moment was just another page in a long life filled with battles he never wanted but always faced. The warden turned to the officers. We need to decide his placement. For his safety. And for everyone else's safety. He looked at Steven. Then at the yard. Then at the Iron Fangs. Then he spoke with calm authority. A man like him does not belong in a regular block. But he might not want protection either. He studied Steven's face, trying to read what the man preferred. But Steven gave nothing away. And now it is your turn to decide. What do you think? Should Steven be moved to a protected unit or left in general population? Comment protect or general and let us see your choice. Rocco knelt on the cracked concrete of the prison yard. His chest heaving. Hands trembling. Sweat dripping down his forehead. The weight of defeat crushing him in a way he had never felt before. He looked up at Steven Seagal. Eyes wide with terror. Voice shaking as he whispered. Please. I beg you. Have mercy. I did not know. I did not know who you were. Steven stood still. Calm. Unmoving. A figure of controlled power and discipline. He looked down at Rocco for a long silent moment. His eyes calm but piercing. Like he could see every lie. Every thought. Every fear. Finally he spoke. His voice quiet. Measured. A voice that carried the authority of someone who had lived life on the edge of death. Strength without honor is weakness. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He simply stated a truth. A principle. One that the gang leader could not ignore. Rocco's body shivered. His ego shattered. His pride in pieces. He swallowed hard. Tears stung his eyes. But he could not speak. He could only nod. Understanding that his actions had been meaningless in front of true discipline and true experience. The warden immediately acted. He stepped forward. His expression firm. And ordered the Iron Fangs into solitary confinement. No exceptions. No debate. The guards moved quickly. Escorting the gang members away. Their previous confidence replaced by fear. They had challenged the wrong man. And they would remember it for the rest of their sentences. Steven turned slowly. His eyes scanning the yard. The prisoners who had once judged him. Who had whispered about his silence. Who had laughed at his calm demeanor. Now watched with a mix of awe and respect. Some whispered to each other. Some nodded quietly. All realized that appearances could be deceiving. That calm could hide true power. And that experience could outweigh arrogance. The guards approached Steven. Not with hostility. Not with suspicion. But with respect. They guided him through the yard. Step by step. Not touching. Not rushing. Just a silent acknowledgement that this was a man who deserved dignity. Steven moved with his usual controlled pace. No haste. No show. No pride. He returned to his corner of the yard. The same place he had stood when the Iron Fangs first approached. Everything appeared as if nothing had happened. But everyone in the yard knew differently. Even the warden watched silently. He knew he had witnessed something extraordinary. Not violence for its own sake. Not chaos. Not anger. But precision. Discipline. Control. And the power of experience. Inmates shifted positions. Watching him. Whispering in low tones. Trying to understand. Trying to comprehend. Trying to measure what they had just seen. Steven Seagal had shown them. Respect is earned. True strength is silent. And arrogance is punished. The yard for the first time in years felt peaceful. Not because the guards enforced order. Not because the alarms had rung. But because the inmates themselves understood boundaries. The presence of a man who had survived battles that most could not imagine. A man who could end a fight without anger or chaos. Rocco stayed on his knees for a long moment. Unable to rise. Unable to speak. Only aware of his own weakness. And of the lesson he had just learned. That intimidation is meaningless against true skill. And that fear alone does not command respect. Other gang members who had watched carefully. Took in the silence. The calm. The authority of Steven Seagal. Their pride swallowed. Their attitude shifting. They had underestimated him. And that mistake would stay with them forever. Steven finally lowered his gaze. His eyes scanned the horizon of the yard. Then he settled into his usual position. Crossing his legs lightly. Hands resting calmly. Breathing measured. Completely composed as if nothing had happened at all. The inmates continued to watch. Silent. reflective, changed. They had learned a lesson far more powerful than any lecture or punishment could teach. True power is calm. True discipline is earned. True respect is demonstrated through action, not through words or threats. The warden stepped back. The guards moved away, and the yard returned to its normal rhythm. But the energy had shifted. Inmates carried a new understanding of the man who stood among them, of the former Marine raider, of Steven Seagal, who had just demonstrated that strength without honor is truly nothing. And in that corner of Redstone Penitentiary, Steven sat quietly, watching, waiting, calm as ever. A storm contained within, a lesson delivered without anger, a presence that would be remembered for years. Never judge a person by silence. It is a simple rule, but one that many forget in moments of arrogance or pride. We see someone calm, someone quiet, someone who does not shout or boast, and we immediately think they are weak, unworthy, invisible. Yet the truth is far from what the eyes perceive. Some people carry storms inside them, storms that only appear when pushed past the line. Storms born from experience, from struggle, from a life that has tested every limit. Storms that are controlled, measured, directed only when absolutely necessary. Steven Seagal is an example of this truth. His calm presence, his quiet confidence, his measured actions, all hide decades of training, of discipline, of life experiences that have demanded more than most will ever face. In the prison yard, where arrogance ruled, where intimidation was the currency of power, his silence was not weakness. It was preparation. It was control. It was understanding the moment before it arrived. True strength stays quiet. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need applause. It does not need recognition. It acts when action is required. And it does so with precision, with purpose, and with restraint. True discipline comes from experience, not from ego, not from loud threats or flashy moves, not from the power one holds over others. Discipline is built in the shadows, in moments no one sees, through repetition, through learning, through surviving situations that strip away fear and reveal what is real, what matters, what lasts. In the prison yard that day, the Iron Fangs had assumed power. They had assumed fear could control the space. They had assumed arrogance and intimidation were the ultimate tools. But they were wrong. Steven did not need to fight to prove himself. He needed only to demonstrate control, precision, and calm authority. And the lesson was learned. Instantly. Indelibly. Respect is more than a word. It is a recognition, a skill, of character, of history, of choices. It is earned, not demanded. It is given, not forced. The warden saw it. The guards saw it. The inmates saw it. Even the men who tried to challenge Steven understood. Power without honor is empty. Force without discipline is destructive. Violence without control is meaningless. Steven's presence in the yard changed the energy. Forever. Inmates whispered. They watched. They learned without being told. They understood without words. The quiet man had spoken louder than any yell could. And the lesson would last. Through years of incarceration. Through future fights. Through the way prisoners judge strength and respect. This is the truth for all of us. In everyday life. Outside the prison walls. In the boardroom. In school. In our families. In our friendships. We encounter people who are quiet. Who do not fight. Who do not boast. And we may underestimate them. Judge them. Dismiss them. We forget that the calmest individuals, the ones who move without noise, who act without seeking attention, often hold the deepest strength. Strength is not measured by who can shout the loudest. Strength is measured by who can stand calm in the face of chaos. Discipline is not shown by domination. It is shown by patience, by control, by the ability to act when action is truly required, by knowing when silence is more powerful than noise. Let this story serve as a reminder that appearances deceive, that arrogance blinds, that patience teaches, and that respect is earned, not assumed, not demanded, earned through action, earned through humility, earned through character. Type respect if you believe dignity is the real power, if you understand that calm is not weakness, that patience is strength, and that discipline comes from experience, not ego. And tell me where you are watching from so I can send you a salute, because every person who watches, every person who listens, every person who takes the lesson to heart, is part of this story too. We honor the quiet strength. We honor the controlled storm. We honor the lessons learned in silence. And we recognize that the most powerful individuals often teach without ever raising their voice. Carry this lesson with you. See strength in humility. See power in patience. See discipline in calm. And remember, never underestimate someone, just because they do not speak. Because storms are quiet until they must break. Respect is the currency of life. Not force, not dominance, not fear. And true strength, true honor, is built in silence, revealed in action, and remembered forever.